So, welcome to the Above the Fold workshop. I was super excited to do this because we've all, as we said in the chat, have all either attempted to do our website or want to, but this is such a hyper specific section that a lot of people don't realize is actually the most important. So I'll get into that, but first I'll introduce myself. I'm Asia. I am a creative director, web designer, brand strategist, and ultimately the founder of my agency, Dye Free Studios. It's a long process how I got to web design, but my background is in graphic design. That's what I studied in school, also art history. So I'm just a creative at heart. Overall, my path has led me to doing Squarespace web design because I feel like I get to use all of my skills and creativity into this one vessel that also helps founders and entrepreneurs as well. So that's always a nice thing to do. And then hi Tyrese in the chat. So that is something that I always really love to tell people because my background really influences how I work with people. I also draw from my background in editorial publication. I used to work for a magazine bunch, if anyone here knows that. But I used to work for a print publication. I did creative direction, brand building, and I personally have an obsession with self-development. So that's all weaved into how I approach my services and the clients that I work with. And so anytime I work with clients or even work in these workshops, I'm really here to get you to the core of what you're trying to say online, what you're trying to say through your business, and really just promote yourself through a lens of authenticity and clarity, because I feel like that's really what helps you stand out in this world of entrepreneurship. And then I just have to shout myself out with some street cred of I've worked with brands from the city of LA, the mayor's office, civil rights department, USC, Google for Creators, Color for Change. So you can say that you can trust me. That's all that's there for. So we'll keep it going. And a little bit background about me too and how we approach things at my studio is that we are all about creative exploration. So a lot of the advice and guidance that I give you through websites is really about exploring and not being afraid to experiment and try things and always reiterate, because I find that there's a lot of times entrepreneurs will try to get it perfect the first time, which I understand that pressure when you're putting something out into the world, but your business and your brand is going to constantly evolve. And so I like to go through the lens of creative exploration. I personally love to work with human first brands. I just love to support companies that put humans over profit, but this can look like for-profit brands as well. And then the way that I guide everything is through a lens of ingenuity. How can we be different? How can we push things forward? So I'm always going to challenge you guys to push yourselves forward as well. So let's get into it. What is Above the Fold? So this workshop is really about mastering your website's most valuable real estate. I call it the prime real estate of your website. So today we're diving into the make or break it section of your website, and it determines whether visitors stay or bounce in seconds. Because as we all know, we live in a very attention deficit culture right now. Hopefully that changes, but there's so much coming at us. And so we live in a world of skimmers and scrollers and people who are constantly distracted. And so this moment when they land on your website should really help them stay and want to continue to scroll or engage with your services or your offerings, whatever you do. So this is what we're going to talk about. I already mentioned it's, visible above the screen. So what does above the fold mean? It's a weird like saying, but it's essentially everything that you see the second someone lands. It's before they scroll. It's your navigation. It's what is in their face the moment that they land on your website. That is what above the fold means. So on the left, this is an example of me typing in a client's website, and this is what you see. So you see this one liner, you see the navigation, you see the call to action, which is the button, and she's location based. So you see that she's based in Philadelphia. So that's everything that you see. It's telling a story already. And so this is really where we're going to focus at today. It seems so specific, but it's important. So I want to leave you guys with some technical information as well, because that's important as you're building out your own website. And technically on your desktop, your above the fold section typically hits between these dimensions. So it's 1200 pixels wide, 600 to 800 pixels tall. a lot of times if you're building in a maker like Squarespace or Wix or whatever it is, it'll be predetermined for you. So you don't really have to know this at the top of your head, but it's a good reference to know because we are in a culture of a lot of different screen sizes. So you know that if you're playing between, close to 1200 or that height, you know that no matter what someone's screen size is, you can make sure you get the most important information within that dimension of space. And so again, I call this your prime digital real estate. On mobile, this is obviously a little bit different of an experience, but it's highly important because 60% of traffic, that's a general average, comes from mobile. So as you know, if we're on Instagram or just online, we're constantly on our phones. So I almost prioritize mobile more. The only reason I personally don't is because as a creative, I love to see a very pretty desktop website page. But mobile is really important for clarity, usability, all of that stuff. And so dimension wise, it's approximately 375 pixels wide, 600 to 700 pixels tall. So again, your builder, whatever you're using, probably predetermines this for you, but it's just good to know. And then a key point as well is to make sure that you have, or to remember that you have 3 to 8 seconds to capture and communicate what your value is to visitors before they leave. That is split. That's very quickly. So that's why today we're going to talk about what should happen while you have that beautiful 8 seconds of attention. And so again, that's your navigation, that's your one-liner, that's the things we're going to go into today. So what does the most, or we already talked about that. So let's go into the stats. So the stats of why above the fold is important is because 55% of visitors spend less than 15 seconds on your website. We pour so much time and effort into our websites, as you should, but just know that this is typically what you're working with. 38% will stop engaging if your layout is unattractive. So design matters. And spoiler alert, even as a web designer, as a graphic designer in my past, the simpler, the better. It doesn't have to have all the tricks, the fun, the whistles and bells. Of course, you can have something that excites you to look at, but this is where we start thinking about what is the visual, what is the image, or is there text that's scrolling and moving? I'll show you guys some examples of client websites that I've done just for reference, but know that that's all a part of what this means. I always also urge people to make sure that you have a beautiful image. Not to put anyone on the spot, but there is someone in here who we had a conversation about their images as needing to either be updated or choose the best one out of what they currently have. And it made the world of difference on her website. And so I always say, make sure that you have at least one. Of course, I would love you to do a full photo shoot if necessary, but have something or a video. Video is highly engaging as well. That really can stand out in this section too. And then I'm getting into more specifics because you'll learn about me that I will go off on tangents. But when you are thinking about this imagery, make sure that it doesn't slow down your website as well. Make sure that it loads fast. That all is easy to do with sizing. If you're hiring someone, they know this already, but you can also check for that when you're checking their designs and you're checking how it works. But if you're building it yourself, there are so many options to use, and I'll put some in the chat, but there are things like Pix Resize. I'll put that in the chat as well, but it's a tool that you can use to put in any photos that you use on your website and it will resize it to the proper size and also make sure that it stays beautiful. So those are hints. And if someone can remind me to put that link in the chat later, that would be great too. So back to the stats, because again, I go off on tangents. Above the fold gets 84% more attention than below that first scroll. So of course we have so much information that's going to live on our whole homepage, but this is where, again, you get the most attention. So if you're overwhelmed with time, if you're overwhelmed with the idea of building your whole website, I urge people to just focus on this section first, and then you can build brick by brick the rest of your website. But this is where I think your attention should go and where your efforts should go as you first start to build. And then also just mentally think of it as your storefront window. It needs to instantly communicate what you do. It needs to show or talk about who it's for. It needs a clear next step, and it must build immediate trust. And so show who it's for or telling who it's for. This is you having some type of idea of who your client is. If you're new, sometimes it's a little bit more broad and you're not necessarily niche down yet, but you can still talk about that from the angle of what is it that you do or why is what you do special? Because that will also start to pull the right people towards you. The example that I have on the screen of the image, it's therapy for couples, families, and individuals looking to heal and grow. We crafted that together because she wants to focus on couples first. So we put that as the first thing you see if someone's attention drops off even after that first line. We want people to know that she wants to attract couples. So I also will say align this first liner, and we'll get more into detail with your first liner, but align it with your goals as well. So again, when we start workshopping toward the end, we can talk about all of this in detail. But yeah, so this is an example, therapy for couples, families, and individuals looking to heal and grow. So again, this builds trust. Strong imagery builds trust. Clarity, simplicity, and design builds trust. And then when we talk about give a clear next step, your above the fold section should be intuitive for your user to know what to do next. And I'll talk about that again as we go on. So what are some high impact versus confusing examples of above the fold of this first moment of your website? This is a high impact is where it's clear benefit focused headline. It's a simple navigation. I can talk forever about navigation, even though we think it's just a normal little link section on your website. I can talk about it a lot, but simple navigation. I personally believe, and I will attest that it should be no more than 5 items max, 5 links, and I'll show you examples. There should be one primary call to action button. There is an exception to that, which we will talk about, but essentially in that corner, it should be one button that is the most important action you want your visitors to take with you. It should have professional imagery that supports the message. It should have clean and cluttered design. And then what is a confusing above the fold section? It's something with a generic headline. I see this a lot. That's why I think you should spend a lot of time crafting your one-liner, but don't overthink it at the same time. But it is generic headlines like welcome to our website, or not really. Some people don't even have a one-liner. I've seen that a lot in that section. It's no, there's nothing there. It's just an image, and that's not enough. But generic headlines, it's a cluttered navigation with 8+ menu items. This is another thing I see, and it's a dead giveaway when someone created their own website. There are always a million links at the top. They're trying to force feed everything right there. That's not how you do it. And then there's multiple competing call to actions. And so again, call to actions are the actions that you want someone to take. But if there are too many in one visual area, it will confuse you of where should I go? Or it might just overwhelm the person. And again, they click off or they forget about it because they're just getting lost in the sauce. Stock photos that don't relate to the service. So I will always tell people to use a stock photo. The image that you guys saw on the previous slide is actually a stock photo, but I will spend a lot of time searching for stock photos that relate to what I do, look like the audience I want to attract, or visually represent them in some kind of way, or are talking about it or showcasing an action that relates to what I do. So if you're a consultant, maybe you find a stock image that is someone on the phone or two people conversing, just something that relates to it. And then another confusing fold is having too much text or visual noise. So again, that's over cluttered design or just so much text that we feel like we're reading a novel in the first 10 seconds. We don't want that. So where do we start? We start with the navigation, like I said. So a simple way to think about your navigation, less is more, and guide their actions. So this is guiding the actions of the people that you want to be on your website. They should know what to do. So why navigation matters above the fold? So one, it takes up valuable visual space. This is the top area that people see when they come onto your website. It's the first thing visitors scan. It sets expectations for site organization as well. It can overwhelm or guide seamlessly. So you can basically start to craft your user's experience. And you guys might have heard the term UX design, that's user experience, or just user experience in general. This is a part of that. And so a golden rule to think about that: if everything is important, nothing is important. It cancels out everything if you're trying to put too many things in those navigation tabs. So what goes in your navigation and what does not? Do include, like I said before, 3 to 5 items max. I love simplicity. So this is where you really have to think about your business. We have to think about what you do, all of that. So this is a little bit malleable based on exactly what you do, but generally speaking, it's your about or your story page. So they should know what you or your brand does. They should be able to click to that. It's either your services or products. If you do both, figure out, in my opinion, what's going to make you the most money and focus on that one. And then you can have the other button somewhere else. But services or products both can live there if you don't have other items from this list. But typically, it's either your services or your products. It's your work or portfolio, if applicable. So if you are a creative, you have a portfolio website, that's where that would go. You have your contact button. Spoiler alert, your contact button is often your call to action. So it's actually the visible button versus the link. So oftentimes that's what that one is. And then it's your blog if you regularly update it, or if you have a blog that has key information about who you are. So either or. I go off on tangents. I usually, when I launch a client's website, I will include and help them craft 3 core blog posts that deeply explain their founder story, deeply explain what they do, or even behind the scenes of their process. Because one, a blog is great for SEO, search engine optimization. This workshop is not about that, but in the future, I will be talking about that in depth. So it has key information in that blog. Or again, if you plan on updating it consistently, doesn't have to be every day, but maybe even once a week or once a month or every other month. If there's some kind of cadence to it, then I would have your blog in that primary location. This is where I get a little controversial with don't include, but I don't like to include the word home as a navigation option. The logo does this job, and we pretty much know that as a culture. When we go to websites now, we pretty much intuitively click on the logo and that takes us home. I think oftentimes this really eats up primary real estate on your website. So I don't like to have the word home. There are exceptions to this, which I'll get to in a second, but it's controversial. Some people really feel uncomfortable without putting that word home in there. And I'm like, I promise you, we know to click on the logo. But other than that, I would say drop downs that include 6+ sub items. So a lot of times we'll see that drop down menu, and then there's so many things below there. Again, there is an exception to this, but typically you don't need that much information right away. And then vague terms like solutions or offerings. Offerings that really can, be a subjective word to use, but I don't like vague terms because you, again, want people to know exactly what they should be clicking on and what they're going to get on that page. So try to be specific. There are some conversations around using the names of services or the names of certain pages on your website as a branding moment. So again, that's where we get strategic with things, but I still overall believe in the idea of using more specific words for your page title on your navigation. And then honestly, don't include every single page that you've created on your website. Again, that's what a lot of people try to do, and you should not do that. The exceptions or things to consider, like I said, are mega menus. So mega menus are these big pop-out menus, and they have a lot of options. This is when you have a lot of core offerings that people need to see all in one so they know where to go. But I typically see this, and this is across the board, but I typically see mega menus used for education websites where you have programmings, you have parent information, student information, things like that. Those are the considerations when you have a brand or a company that is doing a lot of things, that's when you can have a mega menu that has a lot of options. You see this on university websites as well. And then another thing to consider, and this is back to our home navigation button, is your audience demographic. So I would put home in there if you tend to have an older audience base. So again, I won't define what old means in here, but I feel like when you know that you might be talking to either an older demographic, you should for sure have a home because they are not as in tune with clicking the home or the logo for the home. This can also include a very I've worked with the city of LA a lot, and so we always have to have a home, or I will guide them to have that because you're dealing with a whole bunch of demographics because it's a city. So when you have an audience that is very, very, very broad, you can say as a city example, or an education, I wouldn't say education website, but or older demographic, those are two examples of when you should have home as a primary navigation link. So those are the exceptions. There are a few more, but those are the key ones that I typically see. Another pro tip, and this is kind of just to close out the navigation conversation, is to use clear, specific language your customers would use, not industry jargon. So use the terms and the words that your people use. That helps people feel like, one, they're in the right place and that you're speaking to them, but it also is just a clear experience. So right there, I'll kind of pause for 1 second. We will have a larger Q&A moment, but I wanted to check in to see, are there any questions about anything? Do we have any thoughts so far? And if not, we can keep going. I'll keep going, but again, pop on or just unmute if you do have a question, and then we'll talk about that. But as we keep going, we talked about making your primary call to action a button. So again, I have some pictures on the next slide, but your primary call to action is the number one action you want someone to take on your website. Typically, this is a contact button. This is an inquiry button if you have services. This is shop if your website is a store. So knowing what your end goal is or the end action you want someone to take, that should define your primary call to action or the button on your website. Why buttons outperform links? 45% higher click rates. So choose buttons, and this goes for your whole website. Choose what you make a button very strategically because they are typically what people click through to get to the next place. They're visually distinct from other elements. Obviously, we see it clear. They are subconscious signals of taking action, and they're mobile friendly. They're easier to tap on a mobile device. And so some best practices are to use action words. Get started, but call, download guide. You're telling someone what to do. Contrasting colors that stand out. If it blends in too much with your background, it's a little bit harder to see and it doesn't have that same effect. They should be large enough on mobile. This is a general rule you can go by, which is 44 pixels height, but this also is deeply influenced by your design. And then you should only have one primary button above the fold unless, and I've been also having this conversation a lot, unless you have two very distinct places you need your audience to go immediately. So this was relevant this is actually relevant for myself right now. It's not on my current website, but I have two very distinct but also equally important clients. I have big organizations like City of LA, like USC that I've worked with before, like those types of places. And so I will eventually have a button that says for organizations, and it will lead to a service and a different experience for them because they have different needs. Or I will say for founders. So that will be my other primary button as well. They will live side by side. So it's kind of like an either or situation. Situations like that are the only way or the only reason I would allow or suggest you having more than one primary button above the fold. So these are some examples of call to actions. These are small. These are some websites I've worked on with clients, but this one says read me. She was actually an intuitive reader and a tarot reader. And so we thought it was fun to say, read me, as a play on words, because a lot of people are like, oh, you read me, or, actually give me a reading. So that was a call to action that we chose for her website as her Above the Fold. We have Work with Jada. Jada is a coach and she just launched her coaching services. So she's making it clear that you get to work one-on-one with her. And then this is a photographer's website where she does a lot of things, but we just chose contact. So when in doubt, put contact. That's something you can easily do. So now we're going to get into one-liners, and in a few minutes, we're actually going to break off, and you guys are going to have a moment to do some workshopping, because something I always love to do within a session or a call is to actually give you space to start the work now, because we can take all the notes in the world, we can get the motivation from the live call, but I like to use that to fuel actual action. And so I will give us a little small few-minute window to do some practices around your one-liner so that you also have the opportunity to ask me questions. But as a whole, we talked about one-liner being an important part of what's above the fold section. So your one-liner sells your story. I'm really, really, really big on your website feeling like it's telling a bigger story. It's pulling people into it. Over time, just in the history of humanity, we are storytellers. We remember things, we remember people because of the stories that we've learned. And so I like to personally infuse that into marketing, into your website, into your brand story and your brand activations, because it's such a powerful way to communicate what you do and who you are. But with that said, your headline is your elevator pitch in 10 words or less. Again, these numbers are a little bit, they're flexible. So this isn't a hardcore rule, but again, it is a good guideline to use. And then there's a formula to it. And it's the formula I'm going to have you guys work on yourselves for a few minutes. But the formula is who you are, or what do you do? How do you do it differently? And the result in transformation. So how I like to approach this, if you are actually going to do this, whether it's in this workshop or another time, is spend time free writing. What are you? Who are you? And what do you do? Just let yourself be loose. Don't think about your one liner in that moment. Just write it all out, because in that free write, you start to pull out core elements of what you do, or you realize what you want to communicate that you do. You might do a whole lot of things, but you might see, oh, the bigger picture of what I do is this, by writing it all down. So I always will tell clients and anyone I talk to have moments where you're just brain dumping, free writing, because it gets you to the end result faster than trying to make it perfect from the jump. If your brain already knows this, then you're better than me and you can just plop it into the formula. So that's the first part. The second thing is, how do you do it differently? This is where I see a lot of people don't have this as their first liner, or they don't know what it is. They're like, well, I do websites. I don't know how that's different from the next person. I'll use myself as an example. I have a whole history of things that I do, and sometimes it's confusing. I've had conversations with a few people on this call of, how do I define myself? Because I do so many things. But for the purposes of my website at this current moment in my business, it's to sell websites, and it's to gently start to communicate how the interaction with the clients is. Because even though the end result is you getting a website, something that I've coined over the past few years is I actually do something I like to call brand therapy with clients. And this always results in the first call that I do with people. It's my favorite part of the process as well, because we're actually having like a baby therapy session around your brand, because I'm pulling out those stories that I talked about. I'm pulling out these very cool key nuggets that I personally use to design your whole website around. But my unique factor is the fact that I create your website through my process of brand therapy. So yes, there are a million web designers in the world, but working with me, you have to go through this process, and it's also my favorite part, and you will love it too. But that's what I would define as how I do it. So I am a Squarespace website designer that uses brand therapy to create a website that is authentically reflective of who you are. That's not actually my one liner, but maybe it needs to be. But that's an example. And so the end part is your result, or the transformation that you have. This formula, I will say as a sub note, will change if you are not a service provider or if you do something else. So again, that's where you guys can bounce ideas off me, or you can book a 1 hour session with me to talk about exactly what yours should be if you are not a service provider, or if you have some reservations and you think it needs a different angle. So again, this is a general statement. But again, result and transformation is the most important part, because people need to feel or understand, how am I going to be different after I work with you? Of course, I can say you'll get a website, but what kind of website, or how will I feel once I have this website from working with you? That's where you can start to, again, free write, think about it, brainstorm, talk to friends, talk to old clients or people that know you to see what they see, and put that all together. Use our best friend ChatGPT, we all use it, to start to identify, what transformations am I hearing in these conversations with people? What do you pull out? I love ChatGPT. Again, that's a different conversation. But again, it's really important for your one-liner to have a result or transformation into it, because again, that pulls people into it. An example of this is, we help busy entrepreneurs provide profitable websites without the tech headaches. A lot of people are like, I don't even want to deal with the technology of websites. And you might have heard that a lot from clients that you work with or people inquire. So that's an example of, the benefit of working with you, without the website, or for the website. That also implies that you're handling all the tech things that they either don't know about or don't know what to do with. So again, that's an example. So who is busy entrepreneurs? The what is build websites, how without technical headaches, and the results profit. So again, that's how you kind of play with your one-liner. And again, this is just one example, especially for service providers, but there are a lot of different types of one-liners. This is a client that I worked with. Her brand is called Aziza, and it's so funny because this is so reflective of her personality, which is very big, bold, like very strong in what she does. And so when she talks, you actually hear her saying these words in her voice, which is so funny. We pulled that out during brand therapy. But I was like, who is Aziza PR? Like, what is it? And she's like, we are the most culturally impactful boutique PR agency in the country, period. I think she probably said that, but she pulled it out, but she said that in passing. Like, it was just in one of her conversations. I was like, that's your one-liner. We can tweak it. It might even change in a year with some words, but this is the essence of who she is. Another thing I will say about your one-liner is that, again, it should be in your tone of voice. Again, this is a personal opinion of mine, but I also will enforce it on anyone who talks to me, is to think about how you would naturally communicate what you do with somebody, and then pare that down into the one-liner. I think a lot of times we get very technical and industry speak about what we do, and depending on your industry, that might be the appropriate way to go about it. But 90% of the time, even if you are a huge brand, I still encourage them to have more conversational language when they are talking about, or when they're doing copy on their whole website, but specifically their one-liner. And so she actually talks like this, which is why I thought this worked. But I often think about how people will experience me when they get on the phone with me. And that's what I try to translate into a one-liner. So use that as well. Don't try to be overly professional if that's truly not your vibe. Or if you are, say that, but I still want to hear your voice in that one-liner. It could be one word that you use. It could be how I talked about the astrology readers website. It could be like, I'll read you in the best way, like something like that, which is like funny. And it's like, I feel like I know her personality just by hearing that. So consider that as well. Um, Kind of zooming out from the one-liner, and again, we're going to work on this in a second, is to this is also an example of above the fold. I want to break this down a little bit more in terms of what you're seeing, because it looks very simple, but there's a lot of things happening. So her logo, or AKA her brand name, is big and bold and centered. It's also in a slightly different font if you don't have an official logo than the rest of her website. So it stands out a little bit different. I always encourage people not to use the same font that is in their logo aggressively across all of their website or their materials, because it kind of takes away the specialness of the actual logo or your brand name. Again, that's just my own personal tidbit. But also, we kept her navigation simple. On her previous website, which I should have included a screenshot of it because Woo. But her previous website had very confusing language about what the steps are because she was trying to be a little too branded. So again, it's a dance, but we simplified it. We said work, about, services, and insights. Insights to me still feels a little bit vague, but that's her blog, and so it works. It's fine, and it's really her opinion or the insights to her brand. So that's why that works. And then we have contact as her primary call to action. If you notice, it's not a button upon first looking at it, but the font is different. And when you hover over it, it is actually an actual, like the button pops up. And then we have her social media links. I say only include these if you have a social media that people like you want them to see, or if you are active on it, or if it's deeply relevant to your industry. Otherwise, don't include social media icons if you know that you are not on there and you're not active at all. I will, again, in another workshop, encourage you to get active on social media, but that's for another conversation. As you can see, her one-liner is the biggest thing that we see. It pulls us in, it's large text. It is what you're going to read because it's a little bit longer of a one-liner. I want people to experience the words as they appear. She is a local based business. So this is relevant only if you are a local based business. If you can do business anywhere, I can do business from anywhere. So I don't have Los Angeles as the first thing on my website. But she is a PR firm that obviously is in Hollywood a lot. She's in the mix in LA. This is her core. So we needed to say LA based because that also helps with SEO, which is search engine optimization, of Google being able to read where your website is. And so if someone in LA is typing up best PR agency, you have a higher chance to show up. I won't say you will automatically show up on page one. That's a whole different thing, but it helps a lot. And it also answers that question immediately because if you are a photographer, for instance, or if you are, again, PR, people want to know where you're at to see if it's easy to work with you on a logistical level. Obviously, if you're a shop or your store, your address should be the first thing people see, to be honest. And then we have global impact because she wants people to know that even though she's Los Angeles based, her work goes global, from the campaigns that she helps build, all of that. Another thing on the actual live website, the brands that she's worked with on a deep level are immediately showing. This is scrolling by, so there's some movement because there isn't an image here, which I talked about needing an image, but hers is really about this movement. So again, there are ways to have visual interests that aren't just about images, but hers just happens to be scrolling logos because that's what she wanted. So have to work with the client sometimes. And then something that I strategically will do sometimes is have a little bit of a teaser of the next section showing. This is not a must, but I think when there's a hint of there's something below, and also there's a little hint of color here, you can tell it's big words. That's when I'll kind of, strategically make that first section a little shorter so that people can see that there's something under the fold. So I do that sometimes as a little tester. So back to the one-liner. This is just a quick little note about this is breaking down powerful positioning. So as much as it should brand yourself, as much as it should be clear about who you serve, what you do, all of that, it really is an opportunity to position yourself in a powerful way. So a strong one-liner example for ConvertKit is email marketing for online creators. Very clear, very simple. They are an email marketing service, obviously, but they're who is online creators. That is a very wide range of people, but again, you either identify it with it or you don't. Clear what? It's email marketing. Implied how? Designed specifically for creators. It's implied in who they're saying it's for. And then Calendly, which is a scheduling service, is scheduling automation for everyone. That's bold because they're saying for everyone, but it also makes you feel like, oh, okay, it must be easy to use. It must be simple because you're saying it's for everyone. That includes me. I don't suggest that for small brands or for whatever it is. Again, highly dependent on what it is you do and what you're trying to achieve, but use everyone very sparingly. But they were bold enough to use it because they are a bigger service. And so this is an example. Their who is everyone, broad but clear. Their what is scheduling, And then how is automation? That's how they are different. So you feel like this is an automatic thing. So you notice that there's no fluff words, there's no corporate speak, it's just clear value. So that's things to keep in mind. So I want us to take, I mean, we only have 15 minutes left. So or Lizzie, you can let me know, do we have 15 minutes or longer? But let me know that. But I can take time to workshop. I'm going to go off screen and all of that. But before that, I will say, really allow yourself to brain dump first. Brain dump to get your own thoughts out there. I personally like to take a brain dump and put it into ChatGPT if you want to later, but sometimes you don't need to do that. You can just look to see what are some things that I want to pull out and then start to craft it together from there. So don't have the pressure to have it perfect at this first iteration. Use this time to, okay, we have 15 minutes. So use this time to do that. So what I'll do, since we only have 15 minutes left, is I want everyone to take the time to work on their own stuff and start this process as well. I will say some more things about just the above the fold section as well, but also this is the time that if anyone wants me to answer any specific questions for their business, for their one liner, for anything that we talked about or anything that I didn't quite touch on, we can talk about it. You guys can either, I was gonna say, let me stop sharing so I can see you guys, but you guys can either raise your hand or put it in the chat or just hop on and ask me questions, or I'm happy to live walk through working with someone as well. So choose your path. You can either work on your own one-liner or use me while you have me in the next 13 minutes. But yeah, that's also the end of the presentation. So thank you guys. Ashley, let's hear from you.
Hi, Asia. Thank you so much. I feel like I was more confident with my like above the fold section, but I'm adding like a distinct service. And so I feel really confused. Like I think that I do have a sense of kind of like my one-liner, but I kind of had to shift that. And so I'm wondering if you could take a peek and see like any thoughts
Yeah,
and
I
offer.
think um I'm laughing. Um, I think can you share your screen? Does it give you the option to? Or I might be able to share your link if you
Let me
share.
see. Oh, it looks like I can.
You
Yeah.
can. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I think it's sharing my end on Squarespace, but let me just actually go to the website. I'm a therapist, by the way. So,
Love it.
yeah. Ooh, okay. So, I feel like some of the spacing is a little off too, but
Yeah, if you want me to kind of like audit and then I'm gonna ask you some questions.
okay.
um, Specifically based on what you just told me. But yeah, that was my kind of first note, is that there is a lot of white space above
Yeah.
the first line where the image starts. So if there's a way to minimize that, that would
Okay.
help a lot. I love that you're using color. I love that you are having visual hierarchy and the sizing of your font. So we have the quick line that we read because our eye jumps to it, and then we have the subline after that as well. So I like what you're already doing. It's already giving me some good things. Um,
Okay.
I like that you identified for the overthinkers, because everyone who is an overthinker is like, oh, I'm overthinking. So I
Yeah.
love that you use that. The I'm fine, like that's so fun to me, for the overthinkers, the I'm fine folks, and anyone who's forgotten their worth. That's fun for me. So, but back to what you said, is that
Yeah.
you are offering a new service. Um, Talk to me a little bit about this new service and how it relates to your current services.
Yeah, so I typically work with adults and teens, but now I'm going to start working with like little kids, so doing play therapy. Um,
Mm,
I'm a Christian, but I love working with all people. So when I thought about working with teens and adults, like if that comes up in our conversations, I'm able to have those conversations about faith and spirituality, but I would love to actually work with families who identify as Christian. And so that's like Christian play therapy. But like marketing wise, that would also be really helpful to kind of niche myself there. So
Yeah,
um, I like obviously I'm comfortable working with all families, but I thought like niching myself would actually be super good for that.
yes, absolutely.
So that's where I added like the kid graphics, and then I was
Yeah,
like, okay, well, now I have therapy in person because I'll do everything in person with the kids.
I
And
love that.
so I'm really excited about it, but my website has been giving me a headache. I've been overthinking.
You're like, I am my ideal client.
I am
We
this.
all are. We all are, to be
Yeah.
honest. One, I will say, just like before I forget it, and
Yeah.
this is for you and for everyone, if you guys really want me to help you dissect and go through your website as a whole, and it's either over one session or multiple, book a one-on-one with me because
Okay.
I get into it. This is what I love to do. I love to audit and tell you what to do. But yeah, so if anyone on here feels like I really need help, book that and hope I'll try to find my direct link to put it in here. Um,
Okay.
but with that said, though, I would say for you, what I would ask you around this is your question that with you adding this in, are you asking if it should be more visible or like should your one-liner change? Like what makes you feel
Yeah.
stuck about what's currently happening?
Yeah, like I feel like the one liner or helping you discover the wonderful you, I feel like parents are going to be the one kind of reading it. And so I
Mm,
feel like the audience, it would be a little odd in some
yeah,
ways.
yeah.
Um,
Keep going.
yeah.
Cut you off.
Yeah. So it's just like if a teen looks at it, like it's fine. If their parent happens to look at it, I'm kind of like it's like wrapped in. I don't know why. But I feel like with little kids, I feel like I'm a parent. So if I would read this, I'd be like, oh, they're not really, targeting me as a parent. And so, yeah. So that's where I'm kind of like, I'm a little stuck, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. I'll point out some few things that I think apply to everyone because you said some key things. This is where it's really, really important to know who you're talking to because
Okay.
even though you're working, doing play therapy and that's for kids, your
Yeah.
audience are parents and their families.
Yeah.
Or they like as a subcategory, it could be people who work with parents, so schools, stuff like that. But
Okay.
your primary audience that you can directly work with are parents, are families. So that applies to everyone is know exactly who you're talking to. Say you have a corporate brand, who are you speaking to in that corporate office that you're trying to reach? Like know their title because that will help with the language, with the tone of voice that we've talked about having. I think it's a great call out. You have me using the word wonderful. Like it's a great call out that you said about your first line and the biggest line being helping you discover the wonderful you. So that is where I would go back to the drawing board and think about I mean, for both lines, actually, because as much as I love for the overthinkers, I think it sounds like, correct me if you're wrong,
Mhm.
um, it sounds like you also just know that we can see your screen. But
Yeah, sorry, my mom is
you're fine. I
coming
just want you to
for
know.
my baby,
Sometimes I do
for
that.
babysitting.
No worries. But I think also a question, even before you start doing this, is it sounds to me like you're very clear about you really wanting to focus on play therapy. So if this wants to
Mhm.
be the primary thing that you're excited about that you are going to focus on, then yes, change everything. If this feels as equal to the other
Okay.
services that you're answering, then I would say we should work closer to the tagline you are or the one liner you already have. But if this is going to be your
Okay.
primary service, and again, this goes for everybody, know
Um,
the core thing that you want to do. It's either what excites you the most, what you feel is the most lucrative, because I'm always going to talk about sales and money. I'm like, what's going to bring in money either quickly or the most at one time? Again, that's a conversation we can all have individually.
okay.
But I like to vet it like that. So it sounds like play therapy is the core of what you want to brand yourself around. Christian.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
that's when I would go back and take the formula of who are parents.
Okay.
Think about I think something that could be good for therapy is think about the result that and the transformation. So we talked about that, like what's the transformation for the kids and subsequently the family life at home, because
Okay.
usually if there's one kid that needs attention, it's affecting obviously
Yeah.
what's
The
happening
whole
in the
family.
home. So
Yeah.
work through what those things are. And I think to add a layer onto it, it's think about the challenges that the parents are facing, because that language, when we feel like somebody knows our problem, then we trust them quickly. And so, as your current site is, it says for the overthinkers. That makes me feel like you know my problem. Like, you know,
Hmm.
I'm an overthinker.
Yeah.
So identify what that is specifically
Okay.
for parents, and also notice in your own work if moms are more likely reaching out to you, or if it's dads that are more likely reaching out to you, because then you don't have to say like for moms who want peace, like I mean that you could, but because you might get some hits with that. But it could just be in the words that you use that moms would resonate with, so you don't have to say for moms, but it can just think about language that they use. So
Okay.
that is something I would think about. And then with the Christian part of it, I
Yeah.
think that's where you can find words like faith, like words that don't have to say like for Christian families, even though
Yeah.
you want that. But I think you
Yeah.
can think about what words are typically used to describe people who are Christians, or how what language do
Okay.
we use? You know, it's
Yeah.
faith a lot, it's trust, it's whatever those words.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I like to like put all these things together, like dump them out, and then start kind of like mind mapping all of it together. Like it's like a
Okay.
plug and play kind of thing. Um,
Okay.
so that's kind of what I would tell you initially. And then currently, this will be the last thing, because I want to try to help one more person if we can. But the last thing is you have my golden thing of having two call to actions.
Hmm.
Um, I would say, because your website will now be more focused,
Yeah.
your one liner should just be request a free consultation out of what you have now. Because Christian
Okay.
play therapy right now is just like, okay, cool. Like,
Yeah.
but I think the action you want someone to take is request a
Okay.
free consultation.
Okay.
If we talk one on one, that might change. I might have
Okay.
a deeper strategy for that. But for now, I think it's like, let's chat. Let's jump on a free call to discuss your situation. Like, that's too long for a button, but you get my vibe.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Got it.
yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Ashley.
Yeah.
Let's see. We have a few minutes left, but if anyone has any general questions, any thoughts that you want to ask, I can go through that with you. And then, oh, Lizzie also put my booking link in the chat. So again, if any of you guys want to talk to me one-on-one and we get into it, you guys can book me there. Um, but if not, I feel like the things to remember, which after like all of this information, it's kind of funny to be like, have fun with it. But honestly, though, like I feel like whenever I'm doing tasks that could easily overwhelm me or stress me out or just feel like a big project, always go back to your why. Like go to like, I'm so excited to figure out this one liner or to master my above the fold, because I get to then connect with the people who can use my services or that need what I do. Because I do find that when people are building their own website, or even if you are working with a designer, sometimes it's easy to get so lost in the sauce of like trying to find the perfect word or getting everything together that you forget the core of why you're doing what you do. So I say it seriously, where I'm like, honestly, have fun with it. Have fun with like brain dumping what it is you want to do and who you serve, and get into it, because I think the more time you spend, even if the one liner is the only thing that you change on that above the fold area, because you already know what to do with your home navigation, take out that word home. But I think if the one liner is the only thing that you focus on, that will make such a difference in even your own ability to communicate about what you do. Because that's also the flip side of having a good website, is sometimes you should use it as your own roadmap. Because sometimes you're on the phone, you're like, wait, what do I do? And like you have it there for you. So because you already done all the back end work. So I think that's about time. But thank you